Hello and welcome to the Fridays with Alice edition of the Daily Downbeat. Today's song is Brutal Planet from the 2000 album Brutal Planet. And wow, Alice was really prophetic in these two particular, I guess it started back with school's out because, school was out for quite a while this year. But no, seriously, Brutal Planet and Dragon Town were two of the most really sort of prophetic albums in many ways. I mean, this was back before 9/11 had happened, which oddly enough today marks 19 years of that. And stop and think about that for a few minutes. But so much has taken place since those two albums were released, and it's almost as if Alice was able to see the future, so to speak, and really write about what was yet to come. And Brutal Planet sort of took a look at the earth or the world in its entirety and saw all this corruption. And then Dragontown sort of focused in on one of those cities or towns in that world. So we're gonna go straight into the lyrics on this one a little bit because wow, there's so much to say, and I'm gonna skip around quite a bit because Alice does a great job of doing what he normally does and delivering little nuggets and tidbits. The entire song is great, don't get me wrong, but there's a narrative in here that humanity often misses, and we'll talk about it a little bit here in a minute. It's such a brutal planet. It's such a living hell. It's where the bite was taken. It's where we chose to sin. We took advice from that deceiving snake. Here's where we keep the armies. Here's where we write their names. Here's where the money our God is. Here's our famous hall of shame. Here's where we starve the hungry. Here's where we cheat the poor. Here's where we beat the children. Here's where we pay the whore. Right here we stone the prophets, built idols out of mud. Right here we fed the lions, Christian flesh and Christian blood. Down here is where we hung him upon an ugly cross. Over there we filled the ovens. Right here the Holocaust. So what you start to see here is the narrative. And do you ever notice how man wants to point its finger at God and say, look what you've done. Look what you're doing. I'm so mad at you. This and that. When it's written in there so eloquently in this song, we've done this. We are the ones that are digging this hole and digging it further and further and further. And as we're digging, we're looking up, yelling the entire time as we're the ones digging ourselves down in there. We've been given this roadmap to follow, and when we don't follow it, things don't turn out the way we want them to. And then next thing you know, we want to point a finger, and the finger really needs to go like this and then point back to here because this is where the problem is. So there's a lot of verses to take away from this. I think looking at where we're at now in society and where the nation is going, 2 Timothy 3:1-5 is probably a great place to go. It says, but mark this, there will be terrible times in the last days. People will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boastful, proud, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, without love, unforgiving, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not lovers of the good, treacherous, rash, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying its power. Have nothing to do with such people. It's pretty self-explanatory there, and we really kind of see that unfolding, and we see so much of this taking place now. But we have to kind of remember, a lot like we talked about yesterday, the narrative is for us to be the opposite of all those things and to show the world love when we may not be given that same thing. We don't reciprocate what's thrown at us. We flip it and do the opposite. And that is so hard to do. So hard to do. And so like we were talking about a little bit, ask yourself some of these questions. How many times have you heard somebody say, I would believe in God if he would just fill in the blank there. Or maybe I just can't believe in God because of fill in the blank. Then start to ask yourself, and don't get me wrong, there are narratives in life where, there really wasn't anyone to blame, and they're very tough to explain. We talked a little bit about this in the podcast with Calico Cooper. There's so many things that can't be explained. And in those particular cases, you need to lean on Proverbs 3:5 and know that we can't lean on our own understanding. We have to trust in him and know that his will and his ways are perfect. But in most cases, if you fill those blanks in, there is a human element to it. There is evil in the world that we have introduced and we have invited in somewhere. And that is more often than not what is affecting what's going on. And so to wrap this up today and maybe leave it on a little bit more of an uplifting tone, and so we're going to look at James 1:13 through 18 and get a little bit more of a pick-me-up here and really keep in mind this as we're facing the world and as we see these events unfolding in our lives. When tempted, no one should say, God is tempting me. For God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. But each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desires and enticed. Then, after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death. Don't be deceived, my dear brothers and sisters. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of the heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting shadows. He chose to give us birth through the word of truth, that we might be a kind of first fruits of all he created. So stop and think about that. When things are beginning to be pretty miserable and not going quite the way you want, look around you. See what's going on. See if there's something in your life that you may be putting there and not even noticing per se that you've allowed it in. And, that's not to say we're not going to go through struggles, trials, and tribulations and all those good things. But our mindset and the way that we look at them might change quite a bit if we look at them from God's word and God's truth. And so that's really the thing to take away from today, is not so much this brutal planet we're living on, but knowing that the problems of the world we have pretty much created. And through deception, we think that, it must be God that did it. And we have to remember who that father of deception is and what he feeds us on a daily basis. And those lies can interweave into our faith if we allow them to. And next thing you know, we're embittered at God for no reason. So keep that in mind today. And as you go about your walk, try to stay focused on those good, positive things and know those are from above. And when we start to struggle and when we start to sink into that mire, more than likely we're starting to listen to that narrative of the world and starting to be deceived a little bit. And so you can take this to the bank. We will catch you tomorrow. Take care.